let me open the floor for questions. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit without words. I need some processing time.
Okay, yes. Could we give Solo Magadiwana a round of applause, please? And Bonnie Caswells is out of the room, but we can still give him a round of applause.
Sorry. So could I take some questions, comments? 1, 2, I'll take about 5 and then I'll leave them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I put it here. I think everybody can hear without a mic, okay? The mic's, it's just making noise. Thanks, that's better. You go first? Yeah.
Hi, yeah, I imagine everyone's got an incredible sort of emotional response to what they've just seen, and lots of questions about...
You have to speak up, otherwise we have to use mics.
Sorry, stand up.
Stand up.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, I was just saying that I imagine everyone's got a lot of emotional responses to the film and a lot of questions about what it means in a broader sense about South Africa today. But I just wanted to start by asking a very practical question to Rahad. One of the most powerful parts of it was the fact that you were able to use that police footage. I mean, especially at the end when, at the killing coffee, when you heard the police kind of congratulate themselves on their executions. I just wondered how that, could you tell us a little bit about how that footage came out and how you obtained it and whether there was a struggle over that and yeah, how that all came together, because I think it's a really interesting element.
Sorry?
I'm really interested in the invisibility of the London management. You had you targeted specific people, politicians. You targeted the event itself. You targeted the police, and I was quite struck by the fact that the people who are responsible or who hold the infrastructure for such a thing to happen are never actually called out. And I wanted to kind of get to maybe elaborate on that, on the invisibility of London as a company.
Inside the film?
Inside the film and in terms of the media, the general media, because I think, Solo is like the figurehead and all that stuff, but I'm more interested in the powers behind, because I think Ronnie also pointed out at the puppet masters, and that's what I'm interested in.
Next question,
Okay. Now we know what happened in Marikana, but now I'm left with so many questions why it happened. Because, firstly, we hear the police saying they were defending themselves from the mine workers, but I'm asking myself, what were they defending themselves for? And I guess it was a case of workers being pushed over to the edge, and the police position was revenge, because like what that journalist was saying, that a photograph of a killed policeman was sent all over the shore. But what about the poor mine workers who was representing them? And then, so it was a police intentional execution, because you cannot expect 4 vehicles from the mortuary, So it was intended, premeditated. They really knew that they were going to kill some people, and that's why they did that. And now, like the last question that you posed at the end of the film, who really would stand in for the rights or for the plight of the poor mine workers? It's really a sad story. Now the same verse that God say money is the root of all evil. It's just the same, because these guys, just because the mine owners have money, and the top political guys have money, they were in a position to massacre these people, the defenseless mine workers. It's really a sad story, and I don't know how, It's really sad.
Thanks. Won't you stand
Yes, yes.
and speak loudly because I don't want to.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would love to know from you, the team of Marikana, when are you taking this film to the people? I want to see this film in Soweto. We have, this thing is a confirmation that Cyril Ramaphosa is a chief puppet. This is a sign that a life of a black man is nothing. And ANC is escalating this. I'm very angry today that my people were killed like this, and while our president is black. This is an insult. Then we call ourselves, we have leaders like this. Come on, people. I want to see this film in Soweto. When are you taking it to the people? We want to know, we want our people to know. Now our people are thinking that it's Zuma who's giving them the grants. Our people are not educated. Please, people, I'm very happy, I'm honored. I'm coming from Soweto. My brother here invited me. I didn't know about this. I'm even late. I was late to come here. And I feel this is an affirmation, this is a confirmation that Cyril Ramaphosa is a puppet. He is a puppet. And it's an insult for me to see people wearing the ANC t-shirt here. How do they feel? No. How do they feel? This is an insult.
Sorry, we're going to hear some strong positions. We need to, with all due respect, let's try to respect that there are different points of view here. We'll hear from Rihad just now because the film is being shown and we need your help to show it in Soweto, to show it everywhere. I'm not trying to quiet you, I'm just saying, let's leave it.
And I'm not campaigning. You are. This is the truth.
Sorry, to order. Just in order, let me take other comments. I want to leave other time. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by saying sorry to the group here today. It's the first time the library has had a movie.
Yes.
And we apologize for starting late, but look, it's a learning lesson. We need to up our game in terms of our technology. But secondly, please, all of you, I would like us to respect the fact that the library offers us a space in which conversations of differing views are acceptable. We are in an academic environment where it's okay to disagree. So let's not make it hard for us to have such conversations going forward. We have 60 such in the year. Today was our first one that we started late, and it's the first one in which our technology failed us. I'm apologizing, and I'm asking us to respect the fact that we offer this space on all 4 campuses for debate and discussion.
I'm just going to let the panel respond, but particularly the two of you. I think it'll respond to some of the concerns here, and then I'll move on to the next questions. Can you comment?
Yeah, the footage story was, I managed to get hold and see what it contained. It was very difficult working with it. There was a lot of gory footage. There was a lot more images which were very disturbing, which you wouldn't want to necessarily show to people. We need to respect our dead, also respect the audience. One of the lawyers just said, well, why didn't you apply for permission? And permission was granted from the Commission of Inquiry because the footage had entered the public domain. And the footage was granted on the basis that I would get permission from the families to show the bodies in question, the footage. But I think the most important footage was the footage from one of the broadcasters which we released as a campaign in October of last year, which showed quite clearly that the miners were leaving the mountain peacefully. That contrary to the police statement and evidence that they led, that the mine workers, there was no evidence in that footage that the mine workers had attacked the police twice in the moments before they were shot at scene 1, the shootings which we showed in the film. And that's helped tremendously the legal teams at the Commission to try and turn the narrative around from one of self-defence to one of police ambush. The arguments we had to make with the broadcaster in question, because as you probably know, broadcasters don't hand over evidence which could incriminate people or put their journalists at risk. And while they had agreed formally with Judge Farland that they would hand over all the footage, it wasn't forthcoming. And so we had to make an argument that it was in the public interest, a higher interest was at stake, a higher principle of keeping the police and the government, the people who control the police, accountable. The question of Longmin, well, I tried as hard as I could. I made many requests to the old CEO, Ian Farmer, the acting CEO, Scott, and the new CEO, Ben Magara, as well as to other senior managers at Longmin to give us an interview, even the press officer. But as with most others, their response was, well, this is a commission of inquiry and it's sub judice. It's not really sub judice because it's not a court. There's not a court case going on. The commission of inquiry is there to ascertain the truth. So, but obviously people were worried about the legal implications, any legal kickback, or that could happen from an interview given. So genuinely they weren't given. Cyril Ramaphosa, I begged his arm. I've known him for a long time, and I knew him back in the days in the early 1990s. He knew my father, and one way or the other I managed to get him to come on screen. And I think, it's not the first time someone said to me, the face of Longmin, the face of white monopoly capital is missing in your film. And I thought about it, and I was thinking of putting Tiny Rowlands in there. He's this famous buccaneer capitalist who the Tory Prime Minister in the UK called the unacceptable face of capitalism. Longmin is an offshoot of Lon Rowe. But actually, when you look at these companies, the majority of their assets are in South Africa. In Longmin's case, 90% of them. They have a couple of people in their London office. It's only British in name. Well, hold on. About half of its shareholders are British, and about 30% of its 25-30% of its shareholders are based in South Africa. The same with Anglo-American and Impala. These companies have a very strong local shareholder. And the argument would go, well, actually, Cyril's a puppet. The real crooks are the corporations. And on one hand, yes. But I would very much agree with what Ronnie said. The people, who's there to regulate them? Who's there to make sure these things don't happen? Who's there to make sure that they build houses? Longmin hasn't built a house in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Who's there to make sure there's a separation of these companies from our police force? At the end of the day, it's got to be the politicians, and we've got to. The only way we make sure that our politicians are accountable is if we keep them accountable. And the only way we can do that is if we keep ourselves mobilised. There's a couple of other questions, and I'll leave them to to other people, but just to say, we're here for you. We've done a couple of screenings in Soweto. We want to do more, many more. We want to carry on showing this film for as long as people want to watch it. So we're committed to that. In the last 30 days, I think we've done about 40 screenings. We're getting tired. We'll keep on going. We'll have a little bit of a rest after the elections, a week or so. And the Commission of Inquiry, the next Commission of Inquiry is the UJ Commission of Inquiry into the audio problems.
I heard a volunteer that we can show it on the Soweto campus, an offer, so that's great. Did you want to add?
Yes.
Zaitu can translate for you if you prefer.
My name is Zokalo. My name is Zokalo Makitwana. I will start by showing my appreciation. And I want to thank you for all the respect you have given unto us. Even though we have nothing. If I can remove my t-shirt and show you, you will never believe what you're going to see. Because I've also been searching for the truth, because I've been shot 9 times. And I was also accused of things that I did not do. But I knew that the truth one day would come out, and while I was in hospital, I knew that. I went to the commission and I told them that not all the videos have been shown to the public yet. I'm very happy when there are people actually coming up, who are standing up for their nation. Because we are uneducated, we think that only black people can be victims, but white people can also be victims. Because today, the truth is also seen by Mr. Roni that what has happened to us is really something that was not supposed to be tolerated. And the same people like that who would stand for us, I didn't believe that because they are rich and they have money. And we don't have money. How could rich people be the one torturing us and we know that and do nothing about it? It was hard for us to actually come up and say some of the things that were done to us because we were scared. After saying that 15 vans of policemen would come to a place and come to arrest you because of saying the truth, because we've spoken out the truth. But at the end of the day, the truth came out. Today, the world is watching and they want to know whether that has been investigated or not. Will they still continue investigating, and where will that stop? I know that as a person, there's something I was told when I was growing up. They said as a person you need to be someone who's trustworthy. I know that everyone does make a mistake sometimes. But what happened to me is something I'll never forget until I die. Because it is the same white people are helping us today. The black people are laughing at us who are not helping us. It is those white people that are helping us. I know that God created us black people in a very funny way. Because He painted us black. And He painted other people white. They think that they are our God. The black people with money think they think that those who are less privileged shall be their slaves forever. That's why the nation stands as it is today. My brothers have died because they knew that there was something wrong in their lives. They were being used as slaves. We know that a wealthy black person wants to be wealthy alone and with their family. The poor wants to always remain poor until they die. That's the problem we have today. They saw the way in which we were going up the ladder. They thought that it was better for them to kill us. And those who survived the same, they were criminals. And then the only thing we had to do was to arrest them. Those who didn't encounter such, none of them should desire to go on strike because of that. But they're forgetting one thing, that a person's soul knows how to work. Because today, strikes are still going on in Marikana. There's still a strike that's happening in Rustenburg. If they're not paying attention, that is going to affect all other miners in South Africa. Because they killed innocent people. There's something that I always say, saying that an uneducated person, if that person can see that they're being exploited, it's hard for them to trust you, knowing that you are a criminal. Even if you can get degrees and educated person and try to help them, they'll never trust you. They'll tell you that I don't want to trust you because you are not trustworthy. That's the kind of life that we are living. Thank you.
I'd like to take a few more questions, but before that, I'd like to give a chance to Peter Alexander, who's the chair for social change here at UJ, and was in Marikana recently, to give us some input, and also to hear from Ronnie. I'm scared we're going to run out of time and send some of the people who've come to spark more discussion away without saying anything, which would be a shame. But I also do want to pick up on some of the other hands and questions. Yeah, and just when you're thinking about your question, just be aware that I'm going to be a tough chair and I'm not going to allow any statements that are divisive. We're here to discuss this in a healthy way. Peter?
I'm going to stand so I can see people's responses at the back. I want to begin with some thanks. I want to begin by thanking Rihad very much for this film, and Anita Kana, the producer of the film. I've watched this film about 10 different times, and every time I watch it, I still begin to cry a little bit. Particularly at that moment when you see the man sitting up and you know he's going to die. It's not easy making a film like this. It's involved a certain amount of bravery, lots of personal resources and so on. So I think we should all thank Rihad for making this film. I think it makes a very important contribution to understanding South African politics. So thanks very much. I'd also like to thank all of you for staying this long. And I mean this with all sincerity, because as you may know, there was a major rally yesterday addressed by number 1, not number 200 or something. I hope I'm not putting you down there, or 200,000 or something, but number 1. And by halfway through, half the audience had left. Now that's not the kind of occasion this is, because I can see that everybody is very concerned about what happened at Lomé and trying to understand. Can I just finish my comments here? I'm trying to finish. I mean, it's I apologise to your sensitivities. I didn't realise that people were sensitive about the fact that people leave meetings on occasion. I was trying to be humorous about this, Greg. Okay, so let me make the points I want to make, and that is that I think that I am rather concerned about this, because this is a massacre. And let's call it a massacre, because that's what it is. It's a massacre, and some people like to deny the fact this is a massacre. This is literally a massacre that we've had in South Africa. 34 people killed by the police force, and still nobody found guilty for those killings. This is a massacre that's occurred as a consequence of the use of firearms by the South African police force as a consequence of a conspiracy that occurred the day before. The commissioners of all of the provincial police forces, plus the South African commissioner, met together and decided that the next day, on the 16th of August, there will be people killed. Ordinary South African citizens, mine workers, those people who produce the platinum that provides the wealth for South Africa's economy, that those people will be killed the next day. That's the reality. That's what this film shows, and we shouldn't hide from that fact. That is the reality of what happened in South Africa. That's what happens, and it was the government behind that. This is not a matter of scoring points. This is the reality. There was a government that was involved in making that decision, pressing the buttons, and ensuring that that happened. That's the starting point. Now, the point that I want to make is that the struggle continues. This is not just something that happens on one particular day. This is a story about what happens the next day and the next day. And what happened the next day after the 16th is especially important. Because one of our researchers, Dr. Luke Sinwell, who's at the back, interviewed workers who were present on the mountain and discovered that the following day, in fact that evening and into the following day, about 30 mine workers met and they decided the struggle would continue. Now, I've read a lot of labour history over the years. It's my job to do so. And I can't think of a single example in the labour history of this world where I've seen such bravery. People whose friends have been killed, 34 of them killed, they didn't know how many at the time. They've been killed, they died, others have been injured, others have been arrested in large numbers, and yet some of them came together and decided that somehow they were going to continue this strike. Now, I was present around the mine, at the mountain at that time, and I knew how awful and appalling the violence was. You could see the large numbers of police, the large numbers of the army, the remains of the killings, the bullets. We went and found, we were the first ones to find these letters on the wall, A to N, where people had been killed. They'd been killed as murder. They'd been killed, they'd been surrounded, the police came in with their guns and they shot them one by one on that second killing site. And that's what happened, and despite that, these mine workers met together and they decided the struggle will continue. As the slogan goes, a luta continua. Yes. That's what happened in Marikana. The struggle continued. Despite the massacre, despite the bloodshed, the struggle continued. That's what I want to talk about, because today that struggle is still continuing. And one of the links between what we've seen in this film and what we know is happening today in Marikana and across the Platinum Belt is that workers are fighting for a decent living wage of 12,500 Rand per month. 12,500 Rand per month when their employers, some of them are being paid 200 times that much. And this struggle, therefore, is not just simply a struggle about a living wage, it's a struggle against inequality. And most of us here talk about inequality and the way in which we dislike inequality in South Africa. Here we have an example of workers who are fighting to challenge that inequality. And I think it's something that's important for us to support. It's not just a struggle then for a living wage, and it's not just a struggle against inequality. In my view, it's now become a struggle for truth. Because what we hear from the media, and what we hear from the spokespersons of the mining companies, is that they cannot afford to pay this amount of money. That it's unreasonable for these workers to be demanding 12,500 Rand a month, even though many of them are being paid 100, 200 times as much. It's unreasonable. It's going to ruin the economy. It's bad for us that people are trying to fight for this kind of amount of money. Now let's just look at the facts. Because one hears, even from number one, that these workers are beginning to create anarchy. That these workers should go back to work because they're ruining the economy, because they're being unreasonable, that they're not willing to make concessions. Now this is the reality, that the AMCU union has made a number of concessions to the employers over the period of the last 13, 14 weeks. to the situation now where their position is one of saying that we are willing for this pay rise to 12,500 Rand. We're willing for it to be introduced over a period of 4 years. Now, the calculations that have been done by an economist from Cape Town, a man called Dr. Dick Forsland, is that if you look at how much this will mean in terms of the cost to company for Lonmin and for the other mining companies, the cost to company, if they pay this amount over 4 years to their AMCU membership, remember many of the AMCU membership are paid more than 4,000 or 5,000 Rand a month. Some of them are paid 8, 9, some of them are even paid more than 12,500 Rand a month. So if you look at what this demand will mean for the companies, it works out like this. Slightly less than 20% in the first year. And by the time it comes to the fourth year, less than 10%. These pay increases are substantially less in percentage terms than the amount of money that is being paid, percentage increases, for CEOs in South Africa. They're pretty similar, in fact, to what's been paid to quite a lot of people in recent pay rounds. This then is not an unreasonable demand, even in percentage terms. Leave aside the whole question of justice, the issue of whether or not workers should be paid a decent wage. Even in terms of percentages, this is not an outrageous demand that's being made. So we need to be clear about that when we read the newspapers and listen to people who are speaking on behalf of the companies. This is reasonable. And then we can set aside, next to this, the way in which, over the period of the last year or so, the value of the Rand has dropped by more than 30% against the dollar. Now this is significant, because platinum is sold in dollars and workers are paid in Rand. So this means that the companies are receiving 30% more now than they used to for their platinum, whilst at the same time the workers are being paid a lot less, if they're being paid at all. There's a strike going on. They haven't received anything over the period of the last 14 weeks. The companies are saving that money, and at the same time they're still able to sell their platinum. So they've been saving up this money. They can easily afford to pay this increase if they want to. And this then raises a question for us. Why don't they? Why don't they pay this money? And it's something which I think we should all consider. Why is it that they don't pay this? And I can offer only hypotheses. One hypothesis is that they simply want to make more money for themselves. If they're not paying money to the workers, they're keeping it as profits. They're benefiting from it. And one looks through the Lonmin record sheet and you can see how this has been happening over the years. People look at the amount of money that goes to shareholders. They look at the amount of money that goes to people like our opposers. This is significant. But what really is important is the amount of money that goes to what they call sustainable development, cash for sustainable development. They put it in their records. And if you compare the amount of money that goes to cash for sustainable development with the amount of money that workers got, I'm thinking of the 2011 balance sheet, there's as much money, almost as much money, going to cash for sustainable development. Now, what does this mean in real terms? It means money that's being invested in other countries so that the company can continue to make a profit. We hear this idea of foreign investors and we get worried that these people might run away. The money that goes to develop Lonmin, the refinery, the Korea shafts and so on, that's not coming from foreign investors. That comes internally from within Lonmin. They can draw on their cash reserves in order to pay for those improvements. So it's not about foreign investors. We don't have to worry about that. What we have to worry about is the amount that Lonmin as a company is expanding. Its shares are increasing in value as a consequence of the amount that's being taken away from workers. Now, workers never said, that's fine, take my money away. You know, if you live in a house anywhere and somebody comes along and says, I'm taking your car, I'm taking your TV set, you would call it theft. Now, here's a situation where the companies come along and they take things from the workers without asking. And in my view, that's a form of theft. That's what we have. These companies are thieving from South African workers, and they've been doing this for decades and for centuries. Lonmin started operating in South Africa at the beginning of the last century. For over 100 years, they've been exploiting workers in South Africa. Every year, they take more and more in profits. And what workers want is just a little bit of that back, just a small amount of that back to them, so they can have a decent living standard for themselves and for their families. And we have researchers working in Marikana, amongst women in Marikana, and the details of those stories are absolutely appalling. The way in which women have to live, because their husbands and boyfriends are having to support not just one family, but 2 families and sometimes 3 families. Because that's the reality of the way in which people live, in order that some people can become very wealthy. Now, the last point that I want to make is that this strike is an historic strike. And I don't think this penny has dropped yet. As a Labour historian, one of the things I have to do is to kind of count things, you know, almost like an accountant. How many here? How many there? One of the things I count is numbers of days lost through strike action. That's the main way in which Labour historians count the scale of a strike. How many days have been lost through this strike? And this is now the single biggest strike in South African mining history. The biggest previously was in 1987, a famous miners' strike led by the National Union of Mine Workers. An important strike which affected the outcome of the struggle against apartheid. This is now bigger than that in terms of days lost through strike action. That was 4.5 million, this is now about 5 million days lost through strike action. And rather than simply saying, asserting wrongly, inaccurately, lying that this is something that the company can't pay for, that they are right in order to fight these workers, we should start saying, well, why is it that these workers are willing to stay on strike for 14 weeks? Willing to stay on strike despite enormous suffering. If you go to areas like Marikana, and particularly talk to the wives of the mine workers, they will tell you about the hunger that they're experiencing, the problems that they have with their kids not being able to go to school, the heartache of all of this suffering that is going on. And there is immense suffering. You just have to go to Marikana and talk to people to understand the suffering. So why is it that people are prepared to strike for 14 weeks to create suffering for themselves, to create suffering for their children? And I would suggest that it's not just because people want to have a decent wage, it's also because they understand the injustice and the iniquity of the present system. The injustice that allows some people to be enormously wealthy, enormously wealthy. And we see now that the CEOs in South Africa are the second highest paid CEOs in the world, despite the poverty. So people are not just fighting for a higher wage, they're fighting for a just society, they're fighting for fairness, they're fighting for truth, and they're fighting to understand that our world is not just about private gain, it's also about the benefits of the majority. And I think that's what this film shows, and it's what the continuing struggle of the mine workers shows as well. So I have my own little contribution to this pile of food here that's going to go to people in Marikana on Saturday. It's only 1 tin of beans, but it does have an IOU on it. And the IOU says starch food, canned food, soup, tea bags and sugar, cooking oil, salt, sunlight, bar soaps, petroleum jelly, brackets, Vaseline, toothpaste, deodorants and sanitary towels. And I hope that this is merely the start of contributions that were made by many, many people around this room, outside this room, and this will grow and make a contribution to ensuring that those men who died at Marikana will not simply not be forgotten, but that we will follow them in continuing to fight for a decent wage, for justice and for humanity.
We've heard about 2 years ago, we've heard about the present situation. We're moving on toward what does this actually, where is this leading us, what does it mean? It's painful for me to hear arguments that are, and realities that are based on the gross inequity in the society, huge Gini coefficients, because it feels so powerless. And I think that your example of the longest union provides some encouragement that we're not just powerless watching a Gini coefficient grow. Let's hear from you, Ronnie, and then I hope we'll still have some time for some questions.
I'll try and be a bit shorter. Like Peter here, I'm going to stand up so I can see who's here. You can see me better. But I just wanted to say as a preliminary, a couple of things about the film and how important it is for all of us. I became involved with the ANC in Umkhonto weSizwe, Communist Party of South Africa, in 1960. MK was created the following year, and it was really because of something called the Sharpeville Massacre. And the Sharpeville Massacre represents arguably the biggest stain, the biggest crime of the whole apartheid era. I'm sure everybody knows this about Sharpeville. And here, as someone who's actually been a government minister, I've been so absolutely shocked and angered at the time of the massacre, the immediate day we saw the carnage on our TV screens, and what emerged actually quite quickly, we didn't even need to have a commission of inquiry, because we had heroic journalists like Greg Marinovich, who appears in the film and is one of the principal people that Rehard has, and these fantastic, these miners who gave their blood, who have come away injured for a decent wage. And what struck me was how much worse this Marikana massacre actually is compared to that dreadful crime of Amabunu in 1960, March the 21st. The Boer Amapoyes, they were brainwashed. Their minds were filled met die swart gevaar. So any time as a policeman or a soldier, if black people came and protested, they didn't need to have any premeditation, as happened at Sharpeville. There they were in the police station, the crowds protesting outside very peacefully, one or two stones were thrown, and these guys, programmed as they were, just opened fire. There was no premeditation. And when the firing stopped, and the 68 bodies and the injured were lying there, people were allowed to administer to the injured and give them water and call in medical aid. The injured weren't lying there for hours on end under the hot African sun, dying and struggling, like we see in this film, where that one man, I think he had red clothing, is actually trying to get up, and he collapses and he struggles up, and there are our police, not even moving in pity. But we see clearly from what Rehard has put together, the premeditation, not just this knee-jerk reaction of police because of black strikers or protesters and they pull the triggers, but premeditation for murder most foul, which we see what it was like in front of our eyes here, how well the film depicts it. And then secondly, my daughter, Makabani, ladies and gentlemen, secondly, what you didn't have at Sharpeville, they didn't then follow injured people, as bad as those Boer police were, to execute them. Wounded people running away. Ghastly, ghastly, foul crime that we can't sit back and smile. We can't sit back and say, well, the responsibility is from both sides. This happens when people confront each other. Do you remember the cacophony that we heard from my comrades in government now from on high? People saying, don't point fingers from the president to Ria Peter there. But saying that, well, these miners had been smoking dacha, they'd been taking muti, they felt they were invincible, they were at loggerheads with the NUM, they charged the police. Remember that. The miners charged the police, and the police, with their guns, modern weapons, as at Blood River in 1838, against people with sharpened instruments, just opened fire, even if those miners were actually charging them. When you've got guns against sticks and spears, you just mow people down. But in actual fact, we can see from the way Rehard has managed to find this footage and put it together that they drove these guys, his comrades including himself, to the death line where the police were waiting to mow them down like rabbits. That's what we see. That's why we must always be angry about this and not go to sleep, because a commission of inquiry, it's a judge, it's all these legal people, they will sort out what actually happened. Yes, we will get a verdict, but do you really need to wait like that without really knowing the truth of how the police are shooting people down? Like Andres Tatani, we saw him being murdered on our television screens. We've seen other people murdered by the police. The Mozambican taxi driver dragged to his death, Beckersdal, the farm workers in Paarl and the Durans daar in die Kaap, who were shot because they were protesting for 150 rand instead of the miserly 60, 70 rand that the farmers pay them. And there was the mine owners and the police and the ANC government and my Communist Party, Jeremy Cronin and Bladen Zimandi, all telling us that those miners, these guys, were attacking the police and the police operated in self-defense. Who is going to believe that? And let me tell you, let me ask any reasonable human being that when the police act in the way you've seen, all that mobilization, the organization, the bringing in of the armored vehicles, the razor wire, the reinforcements, the horsemen, the mortuary vans and the like. Who here seriously believes that that Commissioner of Police was not going to talk with the Minister of Police and with the Cabinet Security Ministers and with the man you call number Ian, the President, Juan Kuba, as they would say in East Africa? Do we really believe that the police in any country really, unless it's an absolute police state and the President's a puppet of the police, maybe one day that will be happening in this country, but the police will not dare do something like this, as though it's simply grabbing someone from Malawi down the road here in Houghton out of the car late at night, saying you smell of liquor, and take them to some back room and beat them up. They don't have to go to the President for that, or the Minister of Police, or the Commissioner. But for this, don't kid yourselves. They have to have had a good old nod to say, do your duty. Slaan hulle, teach them a lesson. Why is it that we have a democratic government which we've elected to power that allows something like this to happen? Shouldn't we be asking the question? Shouldn't we be concerned about the workers of our country? Anyone here prepared to go down like he does and work down in the mines at the rock face for 6,000-7,000 rand? Who would even do it for 12,500? Come on. That's what keeps the wealth of this country going. We all benefit. A university like this doesn't stand here and provide you with the ability to learn without benefiting from this capitalist machine in this country. It's the kind of questions that if we're serious about our country, if we love our country, if we're concerned about our workers, if we're going to say no more of this kind of murder, that we have to ask these things. And if it means that we have to protest, like a Trevor Ngwane from early days of this democracy, and I was a minister of water, and I thought I was doing good things, Trevor. And they were saying it wasn't good enough, and they were marching. And you know, there's a man called Chris Hani, who you all know was assassinated some years back. And we need to recall that when Chris Hani became the Secretary General of the Communist Party of South Africa, when I think it still had a noble image, that he said, this is December 1991, and Chris said, if a government, democratic government of our country, fails to deliver a better life for our people, then that democracy is meaningless. He went on to say that I will work and mobilize Yabantu, Jikelele Kaya, South Africa. I'll mobilize the people for an ANC victory in an election. But if they do not deliver, if they fail us, I will lead a march in protest against that government. And then he laughed, because Chris had a fantastic sense of humor. He was also a little embarrassed when we were looking at him, aghast that he would lead a march against a future ANC government. And he says, oh well, of course, they're not like this current bunch, the apartheid government. He says, they'll be our government and people's government. So they won't fire tear gas at us and they won't shoot at us. This is what the reality is now. How do you think Chris Hani would have reacted? So if we move on and you have some questions, I just want to then say that what we've got to realize, that this Marikana is the turning point in our history. We have had a national liberation struggle, overthrew apartheid, white domination. We can have black minister, black president, black chief of police and all these things. Black billionaire in London mining, London. And actually the huge profits do go abroad to make very few people, the 1% of the world, very wealthy, and the same small group here. But what we've seen from Marikana is the illumination for us of a class struggle in this country. If we want to get to understand our country now and move out of the great and noble struggle against apartheid, whatever my anger and disappointment is where we are today, I'm 76 now, I feel my life was well spent because I helped to overthrow that white domination and everybody could get a vote. And we did away with that racism in the political sphere, but not in the social and not in the economic sphere. And that's what our struggle's been about as well. We didn't just say we're having a struggle to have a black president and a new flag and an anthem that we can all sing together. We said we have a freedom charter and we would change the economy of this country and we would create greater social opportunity and equity for our people and not have miners being shot down because they're demanding a decent wage. Whilst, as Peter's pointed out, we have the CEOs in this country who earn on average 50 million. 50 million is the average every year. And the miners are struggling on 4,000 or 5,000 a month to get even that. And their bodies will be broken like miners have had their lives and their bodies broken for 140 years in this country since we discovered diamonds, and 120 since we discovered gold, and so many more times in the years ahead while they mine the mineral wealth that must really go to help the people of this country and the miners in the first place, but to help us all grow our economy and have the funds and the wealth to make our lives better for everybody, not just a 1% of the corporate business, the Ramaphosas, the Anton Ruperts and the like here, and the ones abroad. So that's it, Trevor. I'm saying that Marikana has illuminated for us this issue that is the class issue. And this is why, as we come into an election now, in a few days' time. And the election is simply a stepping stone in the near future for us. I'm certainly voting. I didn't say spoil the ballots in the first place. I'm saying don't stay away, go and vote, use your vote. We struggled for it. Chris Hani and others gave their blood for it. And we're saying this time we will withhold our vote from the ANC. It doesn't deserve it. It'll stay in power, it'll get 60, 62, whatever. But if it comes down 3%, it's a slap in the face for people who have become so arrogant with greed and power that they need to be taken down a step or two, quite frankly. And if we can at least signal that, and if we can bring into Parliament people who are going to raise issues of the Freedom Charter, and I'm not just talking about Red Berets, there's certainly a party that raised that flag. So listen to them. There's the WASP, the Workers' and Socialist Party. There's someone like Bantu Hulamisa, who I think is a genuine person, by the way. But all we're saying is use your vote, think about it, let's bring into Parliament people. I mean, Trevor, if you were standing, I'd love to see you in Parliament. People who can confront power, and it doesn't matter, we're not talking about having to bring in a party there that's going to win power. The ANC's there for some time. But let's work towards the local elections in 2016 and the election in 2019. And we see on the horizon, together with movement like EFF, we see together with other leftist groups, we see NUMSA, the biggest union in our country, and we see the talk about the creation going into the future of a left movement, a left party that can begin in numbers and in strength and power to challenge the situation that we have, where unfortunately, really unfortunately, the ANC, as we see at Marikana, has moved, as we were hoping it would go left, is moved really to the right. And why it allowed the police, the arm of state, to defend the property and the interests of London is because that party is coming to represent that particular class. And this is what I'm saying here today, looking into the future, is the way we need to begin to reassess what kind of a country this is and the kind of future. And it doesn't mean that we're going to see the red flag triumphant. In fact, my last point, Chair, is that the people who have got the political power now and are feathering their nests have a huge amount to lose. And when you've got a huge amount to lose, you'll use the police as at Marikana. You'll use the secret police to come for the people in red berets, or the big mouths they'll call the Trevors and myself, to drag us away and to shut down any real challenge, unless we can build a movement here of civil society, of the trade unions, of the working class, of a socialist movement that says to them, don't you dare. And this is what's required in the coming period of time. Thank you. They're actually getting air. And one of the first people they will drag away, if we're not careful and don't protect them, would be filmmakers like Riyad Desai.
Well, there are a lot of questions. I was going to say that I think that we should call that the ending of our session. All these questions. But can I please, the people who need to leave, we'll let them be excused now. I see some people gesturing they need to leave, and then with all encouragement, we have an interested group here. How much longer can we go on?
Just one round.
Just one round. Okay. I'll take 5 questions. And please back to, comrades, back to order. I don't want complete chaos in this room, otherwise we're not going to be able to use the venue again from the library. 1 very eager, 2 in the back also in blue, 3 here, 4 in the jean jacket, 5.
Okay, now I'll cover that.
And 5. Please keep your questions short or comments short. I will. Who is number 1? Yes. Big smile.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My question is very clear to Ronnie. You were there when the economy was privatized. You were there when the Reserve Bank was privatized. You were there. And again, on top of that, you see that in the world economy, now people are talking about saying in South Africa we are dealing with target inflation, but in the other countries now we are dealing with unemployment inflation. Then now you can see South Africa, we are moving that direction. In South Africa we go that direction. Another question to you, Ron. Based on the economic system, in 1996 you were in the Glass Act that you have been called Glass Act of Kia. The one that brings the whole situation today. Ronnie, what did you do in that particular situation? To prove one thing for sure, we don't have social compact in South Africa. We've got a serious issue to deal with. And what I see, we've got it's no longer, it's a class issue, yes, I understand, but we've got a problem where you find that we've got our white brothers, they don't get involved. They are afraid to be blamed. They are afraid to be pointed that you are racist. If you raise up your voice, you don't have a voice just because you are white. So how can we let our white brothers to get involved on the struggle of, say, equality? Thanks.
Thank you. Just as a short preamble, I'd like to direct a message to my brother there. Name is Zako, the man of as well as
Translate.
Translation.
No.
It's not time.
It's a message to him. It saddens me that our leadership, in fact, present here, Mr. Roy, has taken a stance of complacency. And what we do appreciate, however, is that you are here saying that the malevolence shown against our people cannot be tolerated. But I worry, and my worry, is aroused by the fact that could it be that our people are being puppeted as a dagger that is directed to the ANC, moving right forward. One other thing that I want to mention is that you were there, in the times of the arms deal. And it's quite fortunate that you are here, because maybe the people that failed to seek fault in you might assist, in fact, you might assist in actually showing us how can they find fault in the people that shot down our brothers. Thank you.
Sambona. Comrade Roy, my name is Philip. I just wanted to put a point across a point. Remember when Jacob Zuma said that the use of intelligence by the then president to actually silence the voices of the people within the ANC. I remember then we were the Minister of Intelligence. So I think on that one we also touch the use of this intelligence to actually attack our people and how department then dealt with it. Particularly on the issue of the country's government trying to deliver justice. I think there was an issue in Marikana in the footage. I've seen that. They were now the two rival unions trying to actually there was a brewing war or that they were shooting each other and whatnot. In such a situation, what does the state have? What is the role of the state in terms of making sure that there's justice and that justice doesn't triumph over human rights? And actually, I'm also trying to say, look, the beneficiation of leaders from your armed coup, particularly union leaders that are leading these unions and are direct beneficiaries of riches or monies that are contributed by the poor, the poorest, that was saying that as the Communist Party, these contradictions must be been. In fact, was saying that workers must get what they deserve, and I'm for a view that workers must be paid what they deserve, particularly in our country. And I'm saying that the segregation of duties, particularly by the political heads and your governments, must come into play. Look, there must be a serious distinction of what should happen with the grassroots. And you cannot blame that to the ANC. That we are also members of the ANC, but we are not delivering or whatever better we're doing must not be ventured with the ANC. I think people must take responsibility. And I'm with you that those people who were responsible for the grass Marikana, particularly those ones on the ground, when you say that you must kick the dog until the owner comes out. But that must happen. That must happen. And I agree with you. But the issue of Marikana must be that how do we assist our people in this regard? Our people who lost their husbands, the breadwinners, are still suffering now, despite us playing all these political games that we're playing now. But we are saying that our people, how do we assist them moving forward? Not this political game, who must vote for what. The current state must take responsibility. How do we assist our people? We must not forget that the very same government, the very same state that is still in charge now, it is the one that must assist our people.
Thank you. We're running out of time.
I'd like to come back. I'd like to come back on it. Just to come more, we can order we're moving.
Please, no, I'm taking five. I'm taking five. Just remember what you're going to say. Remember what you're going to say. I have one here and one here. And I'm going to get a word into it. Cover your question. Thank you.
I think firstly I'd like to actually join the voices that are condemning the police actions in Marikana. And not just in Marikana, but across South Africa, where we have seen the likes of Andrew Statani being killed, the Mozambican taxi driver being killed. And an institution like the police that we're supposed to be trusting as South Africans, we now have tend to fear. And I think it's not a secret that there is inequalities in South Africa. In fact, this is the most unequal society in the world. And workers must have the right to protest for a fair social change, things like that. But now, the question remains, in protesting for a living wage or for better living conditions, do we now ignore the rule of law? To undermine it? Because to be quite honest, I think we're all watching the flighting of miners shot down. One protest leader said that we marched to the NAM offices unarmed. Funny enough, immediately, a clip was shown. Everybody was armed.
And you heard about this.
Not the workers.
There's currently a strike going on in the very same national belt. People's houses are being burned. People are being intimidated. That's undermining the rule of law from my perspective.
Okay.
Do we now help this struggle by undermining the rule of law?
Okay, thank you. I don't know if questions are transferable. Can you keep it very short?
He was covered, so that's why.
He was covered. So then we are done with that question.
Yeah, we're done with his question.
Yeah.
He was going to ask.
Is it transferable? 2 seconds.
Okay, now I'm just going to ask to anybody on the panel. I'm a student of politics, and I'm very shocked at how, as black people, we can do that to fellow black people. And we don't actually want to make noise about this.
Yes.
In the way that the former minister was speaking now. But in that commission of Marikana, I don't hear any of those being called for to actually ask them to speak out. Yes, it was an instruction, it came from the top, we grant it. But does anybody know if any of that, of calling them to actually come and explain their side of the story, given what they know they did, the police? So I'm going to stop there because you're restricting your time.
I'm going to take advantage of my position as chair to get a very quick question in myself, because I didn't actually I was meant to have speaking time and I took my own. Carl Van Hult's just written an article that's gotten a lot of attention on violent democracy. The concept that democracy and violence are not necessarily two different things contradictory to each other, but it's a new form that we're seeing particularly in South Africa. And he goes into some description. My question is, you've all described it as class struggle. You've all described it as due to the huge inequality in this country. You can argue that's a sort of an economic determinist point of view, that that's just the way it's going to be. You can look at Wolpe's primitive accumulation and say this is where we are with capitalism. This isn't painting a good picture of where we are. This isn't telling a story. There's not another Marikana. This is telling a story, from what I am reading through the lines of, we might get lots more Marikanas if we're really going to stand up, like you say, Ronnie, and challenge things in a fundamental way to move on. And so I didn't mean it as a leading question, but that's sort of the gist of what I wanted you to comment on. So let me take, Peter has to be first because he has a very quick response.
Yeah, I've got nothing really to say. These are the two stars, I'm here all the time. I don't really know the answer to the white question. I think it's important to look at unemployment figures, for instance, today. And unemployment amongst white people is negligible. Unemployment amongst black people is very, very high. White people have done very, very well out of the end of apartheid. Black people haven't done very well out of the end of apartheid. So it's not surprising to me if most white people are willing to go along with things. But of course, as a minority, there's always been a magnificent minority of white people who've challenged the hegemony of racist ideas, who've battled against it. But it's not a very big minority. What always surprises me is that when we have a film like Greenheart, one of the things he worries about is that there's too many of the good guys are white. Because in the real world, there's not that many good guys who are white. And there's not enough black good guys appearing in the film, except for the mine workers themselves, who often are not representing themselves in terms of their aspirations and views and so on. So I'm very grateful to people that they allow someone like me to speak on a platform where there's 3 whites out of 6 people. I think it's very, I think it's a great thing about South Africa, that most people, are not racially prejudiced at all, and they judge you upon what you say rather than upon what you look like. So I'm very proud to be here and very pleased to be identifying with an audience that's watching this wonderful film about Marikana.
Yes.
That's very good. I think, analysis. We could say, and I believe, that the ANC has largely been captured by a victim of its own policy, the black economic empowerment policy. Motsepe, Sekwale, Ramaphosa, and a handful of other people have clustered themselves around President Zuma and are very, and the most important cabal. I could then go on and say the South African Communist Party provide the chief justification, ideological justification for that system of deepened capitalism, a more capitalist dictatorship pushing into our system. I could go on and on about various points of view, okay? But whether you're in the ANC or whether you're in the Communist Party, after you've seen this film, I want to ask you, do you believe the police should be prosecuted? Do you think they should go to court? And do you think the murder charges against this comrade and 269 people like him should be dropped? I want to ask you,
yes.
Do you support the demand for 12,500 of the mine workers? Yes. Because that is our unity. And that's where we stand. We stand and we have a strong tradition of resistance in this country.
Yes.
And whether you're in the ANC, in the South African Communist Party, we have to stand up against injustice when it occurs. Actually, most of the people I know and I associate myself with are still in the ANC. I'm getting many friends from the EFF these days. And I will probably vote EFF. Come on. We are 2 days away from the election, okay? We have another 5 years ahead of us. Another 10, 15 years. I have come to this university and given my time to you because you are the future. You have got it in your hands. And you have to decide when the struggles erupt where you stand, comrades. Regardless of whether you're in the ANC, South African Communist Party, UDM, EFF and so on. We will see where the EFF stands in the coming struggles. We will see where the UJ students, SASCO, comes in the coming struggles. You stand on the basis of truth and integrity of yourself as a comrade, as an activist, first and foremost. You don't pay your allegiance to some God above you, your political leaders. You pay your allegiance to yourself, to your internal truth, to your integrity. And that's what's going to take this country forward, and nothing else, comrades. Nothing else.
Ngizwakala nje kancane nje ndize kumbuzo wakho bhuti wami.
I'll answer your question.
Funeka icace nje le nto bekade emhlophe ehlungwini ngixhosa mhlekazi wami. Kukho utata bethetha ilandula film othetha othi sihambe singaphethanga even lutho.
We went there without any weapon.
La tata akaphazami nxa esisho.
He wasn't making a mistake by saying that.
But into eyenzeka incinci ekutshiyayo and nishiya nonke kuloo ndawo ndibonile ndiyabona
It's one thing that you guys wanted to laugh at.
into ebangela ukutshiye kungoba kuthi gqi abantu be-NUM.
The people from the NUM appeared in the film.
Wena engqondweni ucinga uba ngaba
And you thought that those people
ngabasebenzi kanti aba bantu zii-leader.
Those people were leaders.
Zezi zadubula umuntu epokopoko
It's the
nangapha
same thing
endawo
as show the
elatuka
people on the side.
isibhamu ke wazi i-chairperson waze uyivuma
The chairperson admitted that
before bamdubule
before he was shot, he admitted
wathi isibhamu ezithengiwe
that the guns were bought
yinungu
by NUM
zithengwe uba mazobulala abantu
and they were bought for the cops to kill
abasebenzi
the miners.
nyhani abasebenzi abayithubayo basweleka
And indeed 2 miners died.
kwasinda loye wavela kukhomishini
Only one survived, one that you guys saw on the film.
ukuze kude kuvele le filimu
For this film to be produced,
zayingazuvela zayizofihlwa
it
nayo
wasn't going to be revealed on the film
njengalena mntu adudulwa nele phantsi
in the same way that I was shot and it wasn't shown.
zange idivele nayo
That was also not shown.
kodwa endidudulwa ndele ngecala
But the part where I was shot, like on
Ikhona.
the side, that has been shown.
ukhombisa ukuthi ezaa zinto ezinye bebezifihle
To show
ezinye
that we were hiding
beziveza
some of the things that actually took place in Marikana.
nangoku uqinisekisa
Even now,
ukungcola ngeke side siyibalekiseke lona siyoyike
we don't want to run away from that. It's the plain truth.
ngenxaba kuphethe urhulumente
Just
we-ANC
because the ANC is the
siyayazi
government.
i-ANC yeyize nenkuleko
We know that the ANC is the one that came with freedom.
kodwa siyayazi uba ngoku
But also know that now
seyingcolile
it's full of cruelty.
ngoba amasela onke abaleke apha
Because
kulaa
all the
ANC
things have run to the ANC.
nezigebenga
And also all the criminals have run to the ANC.
zanyanzelisa uba makude kumotshakale i-ANC
So let us cause the ANC to be corrupt.
nxa ufuna siphinde sithethe ngenanga
If you want us to talk
nangento ke ngoku i-ANC kodata funeka
About
icace
all
uba
ANC
i-ANC
issues.
kule minyaka iphetheyo kwezinye iindawo
All
yenzeka
things that the ANC
ayenzanga
has been doing didn't do anything in some places, no improvement.
indawo eleka kuzo
It only goes to
lerhawutini
it only goes to Gauteng.
icape town
It also runs to
Northwest.
to the northwest.
zezi ndawo zinezimbiwa ezindawo zinemali
And
zibonayo
those
uba
are wealthy places or places of high economic success.
izo-investa kuzo
It
kuphela
wants to invest in only those places.
nxa ujonga apha e-eastern
If
cape
you go to the Eastern Cape,
kusekho indawo
there are
ezingena-toilet
still places without proper
Ezingenamanzi.
toilets and water.
ekusela nenkomo
You drink in the same river with cows
ezingenambane ezingenandlela
without any roads. or
so
no
uzocinga uba
infrastructure.
kwezo ndawo inkululeko ikhona
Do you think that there's freedom in those places?
iphinde kubekwe eli xesha iphinde isilethe ucinga uba sothi hayi into yenzayo
Are we going to say the ANC is doing a good job?
ayizuthi bentle into yenzayo kodata
We're not going to say it's doing a good job.
asizuyifihla
We're
beleyo
not going to hide that it's just the plain truth.
ubugebenga sisigebenga
They are corrupt.
This is a bit tricky. We're right before before the elections. We promised the library we weren't having a political showdown. It's a bit unavoidable, but if I could just beg for your attention with that, we need to wrap up soon. I'm going to give, we're holding these comments in abeyance. People have the right to answer the question with a political answer. I've intervened now. I want to give Ronnie a chance, and then we're going to wrap up.
I just wanted to ask them to answer the questions as well.
Yeah, if you could answer the questions.
Answer the questions
as well.
Especially Ryan, that's a good idea.
Well, there were quite a few questions put to me. You're waiting for the answer. I'll be very quick. Where was Ronnie at the time of the arms deal, the time of AIDS, at the time of gear? What was Ronnie doing in intelligence? Sure, ask those questions. And if Ronnie was doing the very bad things, are you then saying I've got no right to speak and be critical now? Is that your idea of democracy? Well, I'm afraid, you would actually ban so many people from opening their mouths. But you see, I don't plead guilty. I want to just also demonstrate that they are so selective, people like this guy there in the blue. He's just like Widi Mantash and the others. They don't ask Van Schalkwyk, the former minister, the former head of the National Party. Do you ask him, where was he and what was he saying? He's a tourist minister of the ANC government. The ANC are welcoming back all the Coke people, all the things that they say. I am listening now, and I'm trying to be quick. So you see, it's a very selective thing. But I was there in a government of Mandela that wanted us to buy arms so that we would have a modern defense force. And yes, I was in favor of that, and I'd still defend that today. I wasn't involved in any corruption. Did I keep my mouth shut over AIDS? Yes, I did, and I regret it. But when you're in a government, you follow, if you want to remain in a cabinet, and by then I was from defense to water, I thought that I would focus on delivering water to the people, and I kept my head down, I kept quiet on some of those issues. Not very good. It doesn't mean I've got no right to speak, because in fact, the experience I have, I think people are very interested to hear what it is about being in government and where we went wrong. And we went wrong precisely in the economic arena, precisely over the gear thing. And I did question Madiba when he came back from Davos, and he told us we're moving away from the Freedom Charter. There were only two of us who raised our voices, Paulo Jordan and myself, and we got crushed by that old man. And I'll tell you, you've got to be very brave, and you've got to be very important, which I wasn't, to be able to say, Madiba, I corner and try and argue. Because Madiba just says, no, 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 young man, just sit down. I'm telling you. That's something about government, my friend. And you're there and you think we have come to freedom. We were doing our best to try and develop the country, and we believed that we were. And I think from Mandela to Mbeki, we did a tremendous amount. And that's really what that's all about. And I'll tell you, the big difference about Mbeki and about Mandela compared to now, and the number one, is whatever you want to accuse Mbeki of, or Mandela, whatever you want to accuse them of, and they have fallibility in politics, you can take political judgments and make mistakes. But they never took, Trevor, whatever, and you were a critic of them, and you had every right to criticize and challenge the political judgment, the move to privatization, all those things you raised. But could have you ever pointed at either of them as you can at the man who's building a palace in Kantla and who's so thick with the Guptas that he lets them land at a national airport, eh? They never took the decision to enrich themselves.